Dear defense aspirants, in the previous video, we learned about the integrated theatre command concept. There's another concept which is much in news and will be of relevance to you, is called the integrated battle group concept. In this video, we shall be discussing about the same. Last year in August, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh gave the sanction for restructuring of the Indian Army. The restructuring of Army entails the following. Firstly, to enhance the operational and functional efficiency of the Army. Secondly, to optimize the budgetary expenditure. And thirdly, to modernize the Army. The whole idea is to make the Army leaner and meaner so that its combat effectiveness can be enhanced. Now in the Army, we are aware that there are primarily three components. Firstly, the combat arms. Secondly is the combat support arms. And thirdly are the logistic support elements. Now Armored Corps, Infantry and Engineers comprise the combat arms. The Artillery, Air Defense, Corps of Signals and Electronic and Mechanical Engineers, or the EME, besides various other attachments which provide electronic surveillance and intelligence to the Army, are clubbed together to form the combat support elements. And the Army Services Corps, or the ASC, and the Army Ordnance Corps, the Army Medical Corps and such like administrative elements comprise the logistic support services. Now, before we discuss about the integrated battle group concept further, let us first understand how does the troops go into battle. Now, to lead the charge is the tanks of the Armored Corps, who cross the international border, closely followed on their heels by the mechanized infantry on BMPs or foot infantry on troop carrying vehicles, so that they can keep pace with the advancing armored columns. Now, as they move into the enemy territory, there are a lot of obstacles that need to be negotiated, like the barbed wire fencing, the minefield needs to be breached, which has been laid by the enemy, the ditch-cum-bunts that he would have constructed around his defenses need to be negotiated. So this is the task of the Corps of Engineers, who help negotiate all these obstacles. Also, while these columns are moving, the enemy air as well as enemy's elements which are deployed on the ground would like to come and stall the movement of these forces, for which purpose the artillery as well as the air, they make sure that they provide covering fire to these troops so that their movement is not interfered with. Now, as they move along, there is also a requirement of protection from enemy's air, for which purpose the air defense that is grouped along with this moving column ensures, along with the Air Force, that this column is not interfered with by the enemy air. As the troops move through the enemy area, it's very important that their communication remains intact and they are able to communicate with one another and with various attachments and detachments, for which purpose the Corps of Signals provides a seamless communication to all the elements. Now, as the troops move on to the objective, the tanks create the requisite shock and awe effect by way of their firepower, the armored protection and mobility. And as they roll over the enemy defenses, they churn them, and the infantry dismounts and carries out close quarter battle, wherein they kill the enemy, as also they capture the prisoners of war and they reorganize the defenses of the enemy, so that the position is now occupied by own troops. Now, in order to ensure that the enemy counterattack does not come, the tanks remain prepared, as also the artillery and air force ensures that any counterattacking force is interdicted much before it comes and interferes with these troops that have newly occupied the position. Now, once this position has been occupied, there would be a requirement of repair, recovery, replenishment. So therefore, the combat support elements, the logistic elements will now move up. The supply of food, fuel, oil, lubricants, as also the repair and recovery of the equipment that would have got damaged is carried out, as also the representatives of the Army Medical Corps turn up and they provide medical care to all those who would have got injured. Now, once the troops have formed in, they would now be ready to move for the next objective, for which purpose, once they are replenished and on orders, they would move forward after once again regrouping and reorganizing themselves. Now, during a defensive operation, similar things happen in the reverse order. All these troops are together, they are meshed in a manner where they are able to support one another, and once again they prevent the enemy's ingress in the same order as I've just described you how they would go into battle. Now, in the mountainous terrain, the tanks will not be able to move into those areas. So this task of occupation of enemy's positions is purely done by the infantry with the help of other supporting arms that we've just talked about. Having understood as to how the troops will go into battle, let us now look at the structure of the army. The smallest fighting unit is called a battalion or a regiment, and the largest field formation that goes into operations is a corps. Now, 3 battalions or regiments form a brigade, and 3 to 4 brigades will form a division, and 3 to 4 divisions with 1 or 2 independent brigade groups, they form a corps, and these corps constitute the largest static formation, which is a command. So we are aware that there are a total of 7 commands in the army: North, South, East, West, Central, Southwestern, and a training command. Besides these 7 commands, there are 2 tri-services commands, which are the Andaman and Nicobar command and the Strategic Forces command. So what we have understood in the previous video about the integrated theatre commands was that all the 3 services have to work in unison so that the dividends are optimized during operations. Same is true within the army also, that unless all these subcomponents are closely meshed and unless they work with clockwork precision, the success in the operations will be difficult. Another point that needs to be highlighted here is that those formations that are deployed in the defensive role and are responsible for ensuring the territorial integrity are called the holding corps, and those formations that would be launched into an offensive across the international border are called the strike corps. So their composition, equipment profile will depend upon the task, terrain, and the threat perception. So based on that, the composition of both the holding corps and the strike corps are organized. Now, having understood the broad structure of the Indian Army, let us now look at the need for creation of these integrated battle groups. Now, soon after the attack on Indian Parliament by Pakistani-sponsored terrorists on 13th December 2001, a general mobilization of the armed forces was ordered under Operation Prakram. Though we were this close to war, but eventually the troops were called back to barracks and the war did not happen. However, some very important lessons were drawn out of this deployment. Some of these lessons are as followed. First and foremost was that the mobilization of these troops took very long, as they had to move from far off areas, and it nearly took 2 to 3 weeks for these troops to get into their concentration areas or their launch pads from where they would be launched into battle. Second thing that was observed was that these troops, since they moved impromptu, had to be equipped appropriately at that point, had to have familiarization with the operational area, and had to synergize with various subcomponents that we discussed earlier. So all that also would take some time. Third thing that was observed was that since the movement of such a large force would leave a big signature for the enemy to easily pick up, so it was very, very predictable that the enemy was also able to move and mobilize his troops accordingly so that they could stalemate our offensive into the enemy's territory. So enemy would also bring in their strike corps opposite our strike corps, and hence the offensive could have been stalled. So keeping all these points in mind, a new strategy was enunciated by the think tank of the army, and that was called the cold start strategy. The cold start strategy basically implied movement of own troops straight from their peace locations into battle, where the troops would be co-located and they would be adequately or appropriately equipped, and the subcomponents would also be located close by, so that during peacetime they would have familiarized with the operational area, they would have synergized with one another, and they would be ready to go into battle as early as within 48 to 72 hours. So the cold start strategy actually became a precursor for the integrated battle group concept. Now, primarily, the integrated battle group concept entails a brigade-sized group that is agile and is self-sufficient and can go into battle immediately within 12 to 24 hours. Since the size of this force will not be too big, naturally the enemy will not be able to pick up its movement, and since they would be co-located with the operational area and their training needs and their familiarization with the op area would have been catered for already, and their equipment profile would have been suitably meshed with their task, their threat perception and the terrain, so it would be easy to launch these small size forces into the enemy territory immediately. Now, the objectives for these integrated battle groups are envisaged to be shallow, up to 15 to 20 kilometers from the international border. Unlike what was perceived earlier, a core size force went into battle, it was perceived that it would go 60 to 80 kilometers minimum into the enemy territory. Now, another reason for choosing shallow objectives is that we all know that Pakistan is a nuclear country, and as soon as its heartland is threatened, like for example, Lahore is basically 30 odd kilometers from the international border, and the moment we cross that threshold and Lahore is threatened, enemy would play up its nuclear card. So therefore, the idea of having shallow launch pads is also that these shallow objectives will be well within the nuclear trigger of Pakistan. The Chief of Army Staff, General Nirabne, held a press conference last month and informed the nation that the integrated battle groups would soon be a reality. He mentioned that the composition of these integrated battle groups will be based on 3 T's, that is threat, task and terrain, and he informed that there would be both categories of integrated battle groups, holding as well as strike. He informed that some of these key corps will have 2 to 3 integrated battle groups. However, the balance organization of the Indian Army will continue to be the same, like it has the divisions and brigades, but it will be only for a few selected corps where the integrated battle groups will be made. Now, he also informed about the test bed exercise which has been conducted, one for the Northeast, which was done by the newly raised Mountain Strike Corps located at Panagarh, and the second was conducted for the North, which was done by 9 Corps, which is located in Yol in Himachal Pradesh. So the lessons which were drawn out from the exercise are now being discussed and further being refined, so that by the end of this year, he said that the integrated battle groups would roll out. Now, I've written a detailed blog on integrated battle group, so you may like to have a look at that. I would be posting a link of the blog in the description of this video, so you can have a look at that. So this is with respect to the brief on integrated battle group. I hope you found the video interesting. Thank you so much.